We've learned about the concise syntax of arrow functions. We've learned about the implicit return of arrow functions. Now, the last thing we want to learn about, and probably the most important, is that the fact that the this keyword does not get rebound. Now, what does that mean? Let's show an example as to when you might run into this. So what I have here is I've got this div with a class of box right here. And when you click that box, what's going to happen is sort of a two-stage animation. You click it, and so it grows, and then it animates in these words from the left and from the right. So it's sort of a two-stage animation where I add a class. The way it's working is I first add a class of opening to it. And what that does is it actually grows it. And then I add a class of open to it, which will bring in the letters that have. So it's sort of two-stage of it's always box, then has a class of opening, and then after a couple seconds, I have a class of open being added to it. So let's actually go ahead and code that up here. I've given you all of the CSS that comes along with it. Nothing too exciting here. That's a whole nother course together. But essentially, the way it works is that when it has a class of open, I transform all of those, the West Boss and the Twitter handle in. And then when it has a class of opening, I just change the width and the height. And then I've got transitions on everything, so it has some kind of funky effects. So let's go ahead and do that. First thing I need to do is open it up in my browser. And if I click it, nothing works. You can see the text is actually there. If I highlight it, we need to select that element. So I'm going to say const box equals. And why do I use const there? Just because I don't ever want the reference to this box to actually change. I can use document.query selector, and I'm going to select the box. Console log the box. Let's make sure we're good to go there. There we go. There's the box being logged. Then we'll say box.add event listener. We want to wait for someone to click it. And here we're going to type a regular function. Why? Let's take a look at why we're going to do that. When someone clicks it, let's console log this. So click it. Okay, it logs this is equal to the box. This is the thing that it got clicked on, right? The way you can sort of think about this is you look at what got called at event listener, and you look at the thing to the left of it, the box, right? What's the box? That's the div with the class of box that we actually ran. So that's good. And if you swap this out with an arrow function here, watch what happens. Window. Why do we get window here? And that's because when you use an arrow function, the value of this is not rebound inside of that function. It is just inherited from whatever the parent scope is. So what's the parent scope of this? It's the window. So if you just go into your console here and type this is equal to the window because it's not being bound to anything. So it ends up at the window. So you don't just want to go willy-nilly using arrow functions everywhere because it's just less to type. You actually need to know what are the benefits and the downsides to it. In this case, pun intended, I don't want an arrow function because I need the keyword to reference the actual box that got clicked. That would be even more important if I had a whole bunch of them. So we can't use an arrow function there. I'm going to bring that back to a regular function. That's what we want. You generally want these functions for your top level ones. And then inside of here, we're going to say this.ClassList.toggle. And we're going to toggle opening. So let's see how that works. Good. It sort of animates itself in and out, in and out. Good. But now after, I don't know, maybe 500 milliseconds or so, I want to also toggle the class of open because that's like the final stage. It's two-stage here. So you might think, okay, we'll use a timeout for that. So set timeout, and you run a function inside of there, and we'll just grab this.ClassList.toggle open. Okay, so does that work? Let's see. I'm gonna open my DevTools here, click it, good, and then oh no, uncaught type error, cannot read property toggle of undefined. That's weird. It can't read toggle of undefined. That means class list is not. So how do I debug that? I would go like this. Console log this.ClassList. See what is this.ClassList actually undefined. So it's nothing. So why is there no class list on the box? So let me just console log this and see what we're dealing with. Window. Why do we have window showing up here? If this right here was equal to the box, why the Sam hell is this not equal to the box here? And that's because we've entered a new function, and this function has not been bound to anything, which means that if it's not bound to anything, it's going to be equal to the window. Now that's a pain in the ass. So people would do things like this. You've probably done this before. You say like var self equals this, and now you have this like self variable. You can go in here and say self.classlist.toggle open. Okay, that works, but not the greatest, because then we have to have like this weird, or sometimes people like to say like var that equals this, and et cetera, et cetera. Fortunately, we don't need to do that anymore. If I bring that back to this, what we need to do is just simply make it an arrow function. Why? Because when you have an arrow function, it does not change the value of this. It inherits the value of this from the parent. We don't have to worry about the scope changing or anything like that. We can just go ahead and keep using this as if it was scoped to this actual function here, which is great. So I'm going to leave that console log in, and we should probably actually put 500 milliseconds in here. And there we go. And then after 500 milliseconds, it will actually animate itself in. Cool. Click it again and it closes. Now it's a little bit funky. So I'm actually going to fix this to be a little bit nicer. None of this has anything to do with the arrow functions, but if you're interested in seeing how I might figure this out, you can stay on with me. So what the problem with this right here is that like when you toggle it open, it adds a class of opening. And then after 500 milliseconds, it adds a class of open. But when you close it down, you want it to be the opposite. So the way I would probably solve this is first make two variables. And I'm going to use let, and I'll explain why in just a second. So I'll say let first equals opening. And let second equals open. And then I'll take this first, and I'll replace it with that. I'll take my second, and replace it right there. Now I'm just using variables. We'll probably still have this problem. We'll still have this weird problem where it like animates in the wrong way. And now what I want to do is I want to say if this.classList.contains the first. So if it already contains opening, that's because it is already in an open state. So if it already contains it opening, which because it's in the open state, then we want to switch the order of what this happens. So I'm just going to switch the first and the second variables. And this is going to look forward into our destructuring exercise. But little hot tip, if we want to switch two variables with ES6, you can simply do this. First, second equals second, first. And that will just switch the value. So then first will be equal to open, and second will be open to opening. And then they will close in the opposite order that they've been opened. Let's check this out. Whoop, whoop. Bring it in, bring it out, close it down. Cool. Kind of a fun little animation that we've made there. Big thing we want to take home here is that we can use an arrow function for things inside of a normal function, and it's going to inherit the value of this.